Dr. Engelke, direct from Germany, will say a lot more than me. I just would like people to shut off your cell phones, please, because these films do have sound. And also, please don't take any pictures of the film when it's running with your cell phone cameras, please. Okay, I'd appreciate that. Okay, the way the internet works, it's a wonderful thing, the internet, but it's also, well, it's like the Wild West still, which makes it thrilling, but also is problematic too. My father did films from, the early 1950s, all the way up to, good heavens, I think it was like about 1970 or 71. And it was, as he put it, it was to sort of answer a need that he had to do things that he wasn't going to do in painting, because his painting is non-representational. He used the expressions of empathetic and non-empathetic, and so he said that his paintings were non-empathetic, but film could be empathetic.
Abstraction.
Now, at this point, I'm going to leave it to you. Okay?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, and, well, it's you're going to see 3 films today from that cinematic work of Ilya Bolotowsky. It's quite an extensive work or large work. I think he made, accounted from your filmography, like 40 films that have titles, and he must have made some unfinished films. So in a little bit less than 20 years, he made this cinematic work, and as you just mentioned, he himself said it helped him to keep out of his paintings all these surrealist narrative elements that he found improper in neoplasticist painting, but that he could do in film. And he also said that he had this idea about media, about film and painting. He said painting for him was an art of abstraction, like striving to achieve some sort of dynamic equilibrium between colors and shapes, mostly, as you can see, mostly rectangular shapes, which sort of, like in mathematics, would point to things that were not subject to change, so they were like, he compared that to Platonic ideas, atemporal things, and so he said in his films he could do things that have to do with not just process, storytelling, but also with history, with things that change, so when he spoke about his films, he contrasted them with painting quite clearly. But I think it's also that in his films, he sort of engaged with art and with painting, and he made very fascinating films, which we're not going to see today. Well, they're all fascinating. No, I mean, I didn't mean the ones that we're going to see. I'll talk about that in a bit. So, about the art scene of the 1950s. So he filmed like gallery owners like Lou Castelli. In his gallery, he filmed Marcel Duchamp twice. Marcel Duchamp became very important for his filmmaking. He filmed the sculptor David Smith and many painters and sculptors in particular. I don't know why that is. Maybe you have an idea, but he did that quite often.
Films were something relatively new. The access to making films on your own was relatively new, and so in the start of his filmic career, it was doing these discs that were the origin of which were Marcel Duchamp.
Oh, I have the image of that.
Yeah, that would turn, and then after that, he moved over to doing films of his friends, or whoever was readily available. One that he never did, and he was scheduled to do, was Jackson Pollock. He never did that one, but I have one of Louise Nevelson, I have one of Nell Blaine. There's one which I can't find of George L.K. Morris and his wife Susie Morris. I have several of John Ceron. In other words, there's several, not just one. Because films, hold on a second, films were expensive. Color film in particular was very expensive, even black and white. Oh, I must point out the following, and then I'm going to leave this back for you. This is a film. This is not digital. This is analog. And so as a result, it's done with a camera called a Bolex Payar, 16 millimeter camera, spring driven. You know, it doesn't have the sharpness that we're used to, we've gotten used to with digital film.
May I?
Yes, absolutely.
You're right in a sense, but I think it's also because these films have been transferred to video. So the original 16 millimeter films look much better. And I have an image from Metanoia where you can see how it's supposed to look, and then you can see the video transfer that has in turn been transferred to a DVD.
Yes.
And so the image quality is not that good. But I was just, we were talking about this artist documentaries.
Yes.
And Bolotowsky, Ilya Bolotowsky himself, he said he makes two kinds of films. He made two kinds of films. Documentaries, short documentaries on artists, many of them in color, as you mentioned, and creative experimental films, longer black and white creative experimental films. And the curious thing is that both of these films use similar techniques. So in the films on the artist, they are not many of them are not straightforward records of the artist, but he uses prismatic lenses, multiple exposures, and things like that. And the same techniques come up again in his creative experimental films, which are just a little bit longer. And also in these creative experimental films, the actors are his artists' colleagues. So the same people that he did the documentary films on reappear in the experimental films. And many people like Bolotowsky have contrasted his painting and his films. The experimental filmmaker Stan Vanderbeek, for instance, calls Bolotowsky a marvelous example of an extremely rigid geometric painter who makes the most romantic 19th century movies. Now this is a bit strange, and it's a bit inaccurate in two ways. Bolotowsky's paintings are certainly not rigid, geometric. They are sort of geometric, but they are in no way rigid. And neither are his films really romantic 19th century movies. They're just as modernist as the paintings are. But what he does is he contrasts painting and film. Many people do that, and they think, okay, and even, Bolotowsky supported that in saying film is an outlet for some improper, or might be, an outlet for improper artistic urges, like not adhering to the strict neoplasticist teachings. But I think actually his films and the paintings are much more interrelated. And they are not, we're used to think of media as something separate for each other, but they are also very much interrelated. And the films, all of Bolotowsky's films are about art in one sense or another. And they're also all about painting in a sense, especially the creative experimental films, that he uses that to, they're very much unlike the didactic films on art that were very popular in the 1950s. Even Jackson Pollock, the famous film by Hans Namuth and Paul Falkenberg. Ilya Bolotowsky's films are much more like he's exploring things, how to look at things, and they have multiple levels of meaning. And you find many art historical references in them. So at the beginning of Fire Escapes, which I think is the first one you'll see, you have an image distorted by prismatic lens, which somehow looks like Mondrian's 1917 composition with lens, a black and white picture. somehow tilted a little bit. Then you have one thing that occurs many times in Bolotowsky's films, which is Marcel Duchamp's Youth Descending a Staircase. And that itself is a comment on the relationship between painting and film, because that painting refers to chronophotography. It's meant to be a last painting, at least for Duchamp. So he sort of said goodbye to painting with this work, and he's referencing film. The Marais and Muybridge chronophotographies, and so this goes all through Bolotowsky's films, where he seems to be engaging with not just painting in a very general sense, but also with the role of neoplasticist painting in that particular particular historical situation. I mean, you all know that when Bolotowsky took up his style, like the neoplasticist style, that kind of painting was thought to be dated. Even, and when he started doing that in the mid-1940s, everybody thought, okay, that is a period that's over, and now something else is taking over, which, according to the official art historical versions, was abstract expressionism. And in his writings, Bolotowsky opposed that kind of just one-dimensional idea of art history. And then what he also, and I think through having this temporality of film, he could do that. He could engage with, he could insert references to his own paintings, like in the back and forth movements on the stairs in Fire Escapes, which you will see. He could also see what is the interconnection between these atemporal or timeless forms that he was striving for and historical time. And in that sense, he was doing something what the art critic Jack Burnham, he said that neoplasticism didn't conceive itself as just another ism or another style, but as something that was sort of beyond these art historical categorizations. And but at the same time, of course, I mean, your father experienced that. It was part of the art market, the art world, and things changed. And so it's my impression that he really is reflecting on that in these films through reference to Duchamp's engagement with film, with painting, but also reference to his own pictures, and also through telling myth about art. Bolotowsky said that these films, the creative experimental films, they all have some sort of a narrative. They're telling, it's not quite obvious, it's a very loose story, but it still is a story. So in Fire Escapes, you might see, this is just one way of telling it. You'll see the space of of 1920s city symphonies, like these modernist spaces of the city symphony, the film genre, the city symphony. Then you have, at the end, you also have a space where all the action takes place in one camera shot, more or less, which is like the space of early cinema. And you also have this distorted, abstract space of modern art. And I'm just thinking about, I don't want to spoil it, but I'll just, in the end, you will notice there is some sort of transcendence, something that transcends this. This is just one way of seeing it. you may also look at this film as some sort of pre-1960s happening, people acting together in an urban scenery and having fun and doing things and exploring the spatial possibilities of this scenery. So that would be another way to look at this film. And beyond that, there are a lot of, small jokes and things like that, allusions. And you have, at one point there, it looks like, you will notice that, it's very brief, but at one point you'll see three men looking at something for a brief moment. And they sort of look puzzled. And in the reverse shot, you'll see what they're looking at. Well, at least according to the laws of film language. And what they're looking at is an abstractly distorted picture of fire escapes, which very much looks like a geometric abstraction. Mm-hmm. And you'll see that. And you'll also, in the film Metanoia, which is, to my mind, the most accomplished of all his films. It's really a great film, I think. And it was the one that was shown at Cinema 16, which was then in the 1950s, early 1960s, the most important venue for experimental independent film. And in that film, you also have this engagement with ritual time, with myth, which you're never really able to grasp the myth of or the story of that film. But you can, Bolotowsky himself, he sort of said it was about a dual nature of humanity. Like you have triumphant humanity, the triumphant figure. You'll see who is the protagonist of the film. He's wearing an Inuit or Eskimo. I think it's in that culture they're calling themselves Eskimos still. And in contrast, but it doesn't matter. So a mask from the Arctic. He's wearing that mask, and he is at one point, he's really triumphant, and then he's also, as Bolotowsky said, a poor lost soul in a frightening world, and you have these contradictory things, and there's just, I don't want to pull this all together, but just, into a neat explanation. It's just one reading of that film, but you could also say that what this film might be about is the relationship of what he was after in his paintings. Something like things that are out of time and things that are, live and die and decay and things like that. And I think I'm reading for you the epigraph because you won't be able to read it.
Yes, that's right. There is a quote.
A quote from Antonin Artaud, from Artaud's article on the Balinese theater. And it is eyes of dreams which seem to absorb our own, eyes before which we ourselves appear to be phantom. Well, it's in the it is fantôme. The French, it's but before eyes of dreams which seem to absorb our own, eyes before which we ourselves appear to be phantom. So, in concluding, I might just explain that you may know the title, which means some sort of remorse, turning around, metanoia. As a profound spiritual transformation. And the Artaud quote is also about not you looking at something, but you as an audience or as people, as the beholder of something, being looked at by something that grasps you, that challenges you to turn around. That would be one thing, and so it's about sort of the intermingling of these two worlds that Bolotowsky is talking about. The absolute on the one hand, and that's something that he shared maybe with Artaud, that he found in Artaud that he liked. So the world of the absolute and the world of the physical, material world, and this intermingling, and he also you could see that in a very simple way. The whole film is in the negative, so he just inverted what you normally see, and it's in the negative, and I think that's part of what his films are about. And I think I'll stop here.
Oh, okay. I just want to add. Let's see, there is sound on all three films, but there is no dialogue. You will never hear a spoken word, because my father felt that films are meant to be visual and not literary. So that was one of his things. Of course, he could have dialogue if it almost made no sense at all. Mm-hmm. And it was musical, let's say, in that sense. He would allow for that. What else? They're all in black and white. Let me think, anything else I want to add? Both of us are available for questions afterwards. The three films run about 40 minutes total for all three films. And I'm trying to think of anything else that's important. Again, I urge you, please shut off your cell phones. And well, that's really about it. When he would do them, basically somehow the script was in his head, whatever it was, and he would simply yell at people as to what to do. He was the cameraman, he was the director. Later on, when I got older, then I became the cameraman, and he was the one yelling at people. But he would yell and shoot at the same time, and people just accepted it. That was his nature. People accepted whatever he commanded them to do. He said they would always do things probably about the best they could the first time through. Afterwards, they'd start reflecting and they'd start rehearsing, and then they'd get stiff and self-conscious.
So let's roll.
Absolutely.